For the next example, you have to determine whether or not it's a function, then identify the domain and range. So first, if I want to determine if it's a function, I'm going to use my vertical line test, where again, it never should cross a vertical line more than once. So if I move my vertical line across, we see that it only ever crosses it exactly once. So this means that our answer is that yes, it is a function. Then for my domain and range, we're going to follow the same process like we did before. So if we first look at the furthest to the right, or the left it extends, I see I have the furthest to the left is shown by this arrow, which means it continues forever to the left. And the furthest to the right is given by this closed circle, so it limits at 1. So I can put a closed circle at 1. So my domain goes forever to the left and stops at 1. So I can include, since it's extending forever with that arrow pointing to the left, it keeps getting more negative, so it extends to negative infinity. And since it ends at 1, I would include a 1. Now because this is an arrow to the left with our negative infinity, I would use a parentheses. And since I have a closed circle including that value of 1, I would use a bracket. Now for the range, the lowest possible value is given right here. So my range starts at this bottom point, and while there isn't a point, because it's a line through, I can assume this is a point. And the highest possible value is also shown by this arrow. So it continues to extend forever and ever. So my range goes from 0 and extends to positive infinity. So I would have 0, comma, and again, because I have this arrow, it extends to positive infinity. Since there is a closed circle at 0, I would use a bracket. And since I have that arrow indicating it extends to infinity, I would use a parentheses. So my domain is from negative infinity to 1 inclusive, and my range is from 0 inclusive to positive infinity. In our last example, we again first have to determine if it is a function using our vertical line test. So if I draw on my vertical line, we see as we move this across, in multiple locations, it crosses it twice. So since this crosses it twice, your answer is no, it's not a function. Then for your domain, the furthest to the left that this function extends is given by this value right here. So this is the left limit. And while there isn't a point, I can assume that there's a closed circle. And then the furthest to the right is shown by these arrows. So we can assume it continues forever to the right. So my domain starts at this value of 0. And because it has the arrow continuing forever to the right, it keeps getting bigger, so it extends to positive infinity. Now, since I have a closed circle at 0, I can assume that I would have a bracket, so it includes 0. And then since I have an arrow and it's extending to infinity, I would use a parentheses with my infinity. Now for the range, the lowest possible y value is given by this arrow, so it decreases forever, and the highest possible is given by this arrow as well, so it increases forever. So my range continues forever and ever. So since I have the arrow pointing down, meaning it keeps getting smaller and more negative, I would have negative infinity. And since I have my arrow pointing up, meaning it keeps getting bigger, it approaches positive infinity. And then because these both are given by arrows, meaning they have infinity, this means that I would use a parentheses. So my domain is from 0 inclusive to positive infinity, and my range is from negative infinity to positive infinity.